I said I'm single, and the three alien sisters grabbed my arms instantly. If you enjoy this channel, please take a moment to check if you're subscribed. The air in the Krill Grand Diplomatic Hall was the color of melted gold and smelled faintly of pulverized mineral dust, a luxury aroma meant to denote extreme wealth and stability. Mielsen, in his perfectly tailored Human Union uniform, felt utterly grounded by the synthetic gravity and the oppressive silence of the Krill elite. He was a diplomat, an emissary of sincerity, and here, surrounded by beings who processed emotion like a complex math problem, he was an anomaly. His mission was to secure the Unity Treaty, a document critical to galactic stability. He knew the terms of the treaty inside and out, but he was rapidly learning he understood nothing of Krill's social protocol. He stood before the three Krill heirs, the infamous sisters who ruled the hegemony and whose singular agreement was the final obstacle. They were stunningly distinct yet utterly synchronized. Orlith, the eldest, stood in the center, her rose-pink skin and emerald hair radiating cool, pragmatic authority. Her eyes, the shade of polished jade, tracked Mielsen's movements with an efficiency that felt more like mechanical processing than curiosity. Her formal tunic, a deep black against her vibrant coloring, exaggerated the rigidity of her posture. To her immediate left was Viola. Her crimson skin was breathtakingly intense, and her sapphire hair seemed to absorb the light. She was coiled energy, her expression a challenging mix of assessment and simmering impatience. Where Orlith was still, Viola was vibration, a kinetic tension Mielsen recognized as raw, unsated passion. And flanking them was Elsith, serene and observant. Her cerulean blue skin contrasted beautifully with her fiery orange hair, which was pulled back in an intricate braid symbolizing her role as the keeper of history. Her eyes were deep pools of contemplation, rarely meeting Mielsen's, instead studying the subtle microtremors in his hands or the minute fluctuations in his breathing pattern. He had just finished a necessary preamble about the Human Union's commitment to peace. Orlith tilted her head, a motion of minimal economy. Your sincerity metrics register high, Human Mielsen, Orlith stated, her voice a low, resonant murmur that commanded the vast hall. We have calculated the political risks. The treaty is acceptable. Mielsen let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That is excellent news, Heir Orlith. The final signatures can be. One condition remains, Viola cut in, her voice possessing a sharper, more demanding edge. She stepped forward, reducing the distance between them by a pace that was just shy of aggressive. The signing ceremony requires the validation of the Krill Consort Protocol. For the three of us to bind our political authority, we must also bind our personal authority through a singular, agreed-upon partner. Mielsen frowned, adjusting his stance. His blue-gray eyes scanned their faces, trying to find the emotional map for this curveball. He saw only profound seriousness. I am unfamiliar with that particular requirement. What exactly does this protocol entail for the partner? Elsith finally looked at him, her intense blue eyes holding a strange mixture of detached curiosity and sudden, desperate hope. It requires absolute commitment, Mielsen. It requires unification. The Krill heirs must present a singular, undivided front in all matters, including those of the heart and body. Orlith stepped forward again, her jaw hardening. We have observed you, human. Your species possesses a unique biological trait, the ability to form deep, sincere, and individual bonds simultaneously without political compromise. Krill history suggests this is the only way to genuinely unify our three distinct internal emotional matrices. We do not possess this depth of compartmentalized affection. It is a pragmatic choice, Viola hissed, though her eyes were shining with something dangerously close to excitement. You are the logical answer, Mielsen. Mielsen felt his throat tighten. His diplomatic sincerity was his best weapon, but here it had become a liability. They weren't asking him to be a lover, they were asking him to be the emotional glue for their civilization. Heirs, Mielsen began, choosing his words carefully, his voice softening into the earnest, grounded tone that had disarmed hostile planetary governors before. I am flattered by the clinical assessment of my species' capacity, however, I must be clear. I am here as a representative of the Human Union. I do not come with any prior commitments. I am, in fact, entirely single. The silence that followed was so complete Mielsen could hear the faint whirring of the cooling vents in the walls. Then the title's premise validated itself with terrifying, sensual speed. Viola moved first, her crimson skin blazing as she lunged forward, not with violence but with terrifying proprietary speed. Her hand shot out and clamped around Nielsen's right forearm, the grip surprisingly strong and possessive. Her fingers, fine and elongated, dug just slightly above his elbow. Claimed, Viola breathed, her sapphire hair brushing his shoulder, her eyes locked on his, dark and primal. Simultaneously, Orlith mirrored the action, her rose-pink fingers wrapping around his left forearm, a grip of cold, absolute certainty. Her strength was precise and inescapable. Accepted, Orlith announced, her jade eyes challenging the entire room and Nielsen himself. Before Nielsen could utter a single word of protest or appeal, Elsith stepped in behind them, her blue hands sliding over Orlith's and Viola's shoulders and settling against Nielsen's upper back, her presence both demanding and soothing. Her fiery hair cascaded over his white uniform. "The protocol is initiated," Elsith confirmed, her voice a silken thread of finality. "We pick us all, human Nielsen." In that instant, Nielsen's mind, usually a fortress of diplomatic composure, blanked. He felt the intense, combined heat of 3 alien bodies pressing against him, the sharp texture of their skin, the shock of their pheromones, not like a perfume but like an electrical current demanding attention. This was not a flirtation, this was a political conquest. "Wait," Nielsen managed, trying to keep his voice steady as he felt the immediate, overwhelming shift in atmosphere. "This is a serious commitment. I need to understand the implications before I can formally consent to any." "Consent is assumed by your public declaration of single status," Orlith stated coolly, tightening her grip slightly, guiding him away from the podium. "Your availability was the necessary trigger for the Krill law of unification." Viola leaned in, her warm breath against his ear, sending a shiver through him that had nothing to do with diplomatic outrage. "And your capacity for this unification, human, is about to be tested, immediately." The 3 sisters, moving in perfect, ruthless synchronization, began to escort Nielsen out of the hall, ignoring the stunned murmurs of the Krill assembly. He was not consulted, he was simply moved. They passed through intricate, silent corridors until they reached a lavish, private wing. They stopped before a reinforced door designated only by a crystalline symbol. Viola shoved the door open. "This is the royal suite. For the duration of the treaty negotiations and the finalization of the consort protocol, this is your confinement." Nielsen finally pulled his arms free, his expression hardened, the sincerity in his eyes replaced by focused challenge. "Confinement, I am not a prisoner or a commodity, heirs. If this relationship is to proceed, it will be on terms of mutual recognized equality, not forced protocol." Orlith let a flicker of interest cross her face. "Equality, that is a very human concept. Tell us, Nielsen, how does one establish equality with 3 rulers who now share a vital, political and physical dependency upon you?" Elsith's hands went to the clasp of her ceremonial collar. "We shall discover that answer together, Nielsen. The Krill learn through experience." With that, Orlith and Viola pushed him gently but firmly across the threshold of the royal suite. The door sealed behind him with a silent, terrifying finality. He found himself in a space designed for sensual politics, plush, low lighting, and a massive, circular bed dominating the center of the room. The 3 sisters entered, stripping off their ceremonial outerwear. They were still fully dressed in their simple, black bandeau tops and white floor-length skirts, but the removal of the outer garments felt like an absolute shift in context. They stood before him, a terrifying, beautiful trinity of high-stakes desire and political necessity. "We have very little time before the public scrutiny begins," Orlith stated, already moving toward him. "We must establish the validity of the bond before Councillor Treval can object." "And we must understand the mechanics of your famed human intensity," Viola whispered, approaching his other side, her gaze burning with an almost scientific curiosity mixed with raw hunger. Elsith remained slightly back, her head cocked. "Show us, Nielsen. Show us the unique capability that makes your species the only viable choice for the Krill unification." He looked at the 3 of them, a politician, a strategist, and a historian, all demanding the same thing, his unique human capacity for profound, individual connection. He knew he couldn't fight them physically or politically right now. The only way out was through. The only way to assert his human dignity was to demand authenticity in the face of their calculated need. Nielsen took a slow, deliberate step back, raising his hands not in surrender but in a request for space. His blue-gray eyes pinned Orlith first. "If this is a contract, heirs, then the terms start now," he declared, his voice firm. "I am not here to be a consensus tool, I am here to build a connection, and I will not allow one of you to be subsumed by the needs of the others. I will not engage in a shared performance until I have negotiated the terms, individually, with all three of you, and that begins with understanding you, Orlith." Orlith stopped, her expression freezing, stunned. No consort had ever demanded individual focus before the political bonding. Nielsen had just thrown their cold protocol into chaos, and the intensity in his eyes was the first true evidence of the unique human trait they sought. The game had begun. Nielsen's unexpected assertion of individual consent had the desired effect. A palpable shock ran through the Krill sisters, momentarily shattering their synchronized advance. Viola's coiled stance loosened, and Elsith took a small, almost imperceptible step backward, her gaze focusing on Orlith. Orlith, however, was the one Nielsen had challenged, and her recovery was instantaneous, though visibly effortful. She studied him with an intense, narrowed gaze, her rose-pink skin seeming to deepen in color under the strain of rethinking the situation. "You seek to delay the protocol with procedural demands human," Orlith stated, the words clipped and sharp. "That is inefficient. Our political viability requires immediate confirmation of the bond. And my personal dignity requires mutual respect, Heir Orlith," Nielsen countered, maintaining eye contact. "I am not a resource to be allocated. I am a partner to be chosen by each of you individually. If you want the depth of human commitment, you have to earn it the human way, through sincerity." Viola scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest, the action pulling the black fabric taut. "Sincerity, we are rulers of 1,000 systems, we offered you power and privilege, what more do you require?" "I require you," Nielsen said, his voice dropping slightly, pinning Orlith with the raw earnestness in his eyes. "I require the pragmatic leader who stands before me, not the consensus symbol. I need to understand what you, Orlith, want from this connection, separate from the needs of the hegemony." The question hit Orlith like a physical blow. Krill culture did not differentiate between public role and private need, especially for the heirs. Orlith's jade eyes flickered. She looked away for a fraction of a second, a massive surrender in Krill non-verbal language before forcing her gaze back to his. "I require control, Nielsen," she admitted, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. "Political control. The treaty stabilizes the sectors, ensuring Krill dominance. You stabilize us. The protocol requires absolute physical submission, and I demand that submission be absolute and directed." "Submission to what?" Nielsen challenged gently. "To the political necessity, or to the genuine needs you hide beneath that efficiency?" He took one slow step forward, closing the distance he had initially created. The air around Orlith was still frigid with her control, but Nielsen could feel the immense, suppressed heat radiating off her rose-pink skin. He raised a hand not to touch her but to hover just above her shoulder. Orlith didn't flinch, but her breath hitched, a tiny, almost inaudible sound. "The protocol dictates we proceed immediately, human," Orlith managed, her voice suddenly rougher. "Then let us proceed with your terms first," Nielsen agreed. "You demand control and direction, show me, not the hegemony, you." He watched her process the demand. She was used to issuing orders, not having them thrown back at her as a sensual challenge. Her jaw tightened and a dangerous, calculated fire lit her eyes. "Very well, Nielsen," Orlith hissed, the political veneer finally dissolving into something deeper and more personal. She moved with startling speed, closing the final distance. She didn't embrace him, she seized the collar of his uniform, twisting the high fabric with a sharp tug that brought his face down to hers. Her lips were firm, cool, and demanding. This was not an invitation, it was an act of acquisition. She kissed him with the disciplined precision of a general securing a vital position. Her hand moved from his collar to the back of his neck, the pressure firm and non-negotiable, guiding the angle of his head. Nielsen did not resist. Instead, he met her demand with the overwhelming, organic intensity of a human response. He deepened the kiss, allowing the genuine, unbridled sincerity of his attention to pour into the act. He didn't try to dominate her, he flooded the controlled space with raw, focused desire. He used his tongue to trace the sharp outline of her lips, insisting on soft exploration where she demanded hard command. Orlith groaned, a low, surprised sound of total loss of control. The coolness of her lips rapidly warmed under the prolonged, focused attention. Her rigid posture began to buckle as Nielsen gently shifted his grip to her waist, his thumbs pressing into the small of her back, the heat of his skin shocking against her own. He could feel the tension radiating off her, the lifelong habit of ruthless self-control, fighting the sudden, overwhelming sensation of being the singular focus of a human being's profound desire. The Krill viewed pleasure as a measured optimization. Nielsen's touch was an electrical surge, bypassing all their internal regulators. When she finally broke the kiss, Orlith was trembling slightly, her jade eyes wide and unfocused. The severity of her expression had been completely wiped away. She had commanded a physical response, and Nielsen had delivered, but he had leveraged the intensity of the delivery to seize control of the emotional space. Viola and Elsith stood silently watching, their own breathing visibly elevated by the raw display of focus. What was that?" Orlith stammered, pulling her hand away from his neck, inspecting her own trembling fingers as if they belonged to someone else. "That was sincerity, Orlith," Nielsen murmured, gently adjusting her collar, his touch lingering. "It was the commitment you asked for, directed only at you. Your control is a defense mechanism. I respect the diplomat, but I want the woman behind the treaty." He stepped back then, creating a respectful distance. He gave her a moment to reassert her political facade, to process the unexpected intimacy of the experience. "Now, Herr Orlith," Nielsen said, his tone returning to that of a professional negotiator, though his eyes still held the heat of the encounter. "Are we in agreement? My participation is contingent on the sincerity of our individual bonds, starting with this one. I will not be used for political unity unless I am also allowed to respect and cherish your individual needs." Orlith swallowed hard, the movement visible beneath her sharp chin. She looked at Viola, then Elsith, a silent communication passing between them, a flash of disbelief mixed with urgent recognition. The human had bypassed their defenses in one intimate exchange. "Your terms are accepted, Nielsen," Orlith finally decreed, her voice heavy with the weight of the concession. She smoothed the black fabric over her rose-pink chest, re-establishing her exterior command, though her skin was flushed darker than Nielsen had seen it before. "We proceed with the next sister, immediately. We are still under a time constraint." She turned to Viola, gesturing with a slight, almost angry nod. The shift in atmosphere was instantaneous. Orlith's measured control evaporated, replaced by Viola's eager, predatory anticipation. Viola approached Nielsen like a predator sizing up formidable prey. Her movements were fluid and intense, a perfect expression of her role as the Krill strategist and commander. She dismissed Orlith's need for control with a flick of her blue hair. "Orlith requires certainty and structure," Viola announced, circling Nielsen slowly, her gaze raking over his human form, his shoulders, his torso, the powerful curve of his forearms. "I require proof of capability. Krill's strategy is about ruthless, immediate efficiency. I need to know you can withstand and thrive within the highest parameters of intensity." Nielsen turned slowly with her, his posture relaxed but ready. He could feel the energy radiating off her crimson skin, a palpable wave of heat and adrenaline. "I am a human diplomat, Herr Viola, not a synthetic pleasure unit," Nielsen replied, his voice calm. "My intensity is not measured by a dial. It is generated by conviction. I respond to authenticity." Viola stopped directly in front of him, close enough that Nielsen could smell the metallic, complex scent of her natural pheromones, which were spiking aggressively, signaling challenge and desire. "Authenticity is weakness," Viola scoffed, a genuine smirk gracing her lips. "Krill evolution bred out emotional noise for physical optimization. We optimize our pleasure through calculated action. You, Nielsen, are an unoptimized variable. Show me the unfiltered passion Orlith was unable to catalog." She reached out, and her grip on his wrist was immediate and demanding. Unlike Orlith's political claim, Viola's grip was a physical test. She pulled him forward sharply, forcing Nielsen to take a reflexive step to maintain balance. "Let us establish your limits, human," Viola commanded, her voice dropping to a rough whisper. "My parameters are pain, endurance, and immediate, overwhelming response. If you flinch, if you hesitate, if you cannot meet the raw, unmeasured demands of pure Krill desire, you are useless to the unification protocol." Nielsen felt a surge of adrenaline, not of fear, but of challenge. This was territory he understood better than diplomatic protocol. Human beings at their core were animals of immense resilience and surprising capacity for both pain and pleasure, especially when driven by genuine connection. "I don't hesitate, Viola," Nielsen stated, his blue-gray eyes darkening with focus. He leveraged the tension in her grip, pulling her closer until their bodies were nearly touching. but I will not tolerate cruelty. I will meet your demand for intensity, but I will deliver it with an equal measure of respect and care. That is the human way, total dedication to the moment without compromise. Viola's eyes widened, struck by the sudden, intense focus. She released his wrist, but only to slap her hands flat against his chest, pushing him back with surprising force. Nielsen stumbled 2 steps, his feet gripping the plush carpet for stability. You talk too much, diplomat, Viola spat, her breath ragged. Show me your dedication. If your human body can meet my needs, then your words are redundant. She moved again, but this time it was a blur of motion meant to overwhelm him. She vaulted onto the massive circular bed, landing gracefully in the center. She reclined, her sapphire hair fanned out, her crimson skin a vivid contrast to the pale sheets. Her posture was an open invitation and a trap. I require satisfaction, Viola stated, her eyes locked on his, dark with hunger. Prove your species' capability, Nielsen, now. Nielsen looked at Orlith and Elsith, who stood near the edge of the room, watching with an unnerving scientific detachment. This was a test, a performance, and a crucial hurdle. He walked toward the bed, moving deliberately. He didn't rush, maintaining his composure. He understood the test. Viola needed him to be consumed by her passion, but retain the presence of mind to reciprocate, not just submit to her force. When he reached the bedside, Nielsen didn't climb onto the mattress. He simply knelt beside the bed, bringing his face level with hers. Viola watched, confused by his non-standard response. "What are you doing, human?" Viola asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "I am focusing," Nielsen whispered, his expression intensely concentrated. "You want intensity. Human passion is driven by sight, by touch, by the complete surrender of focus. You want me to be a physical subject, but I demand to be a partner." He reached out, his hand gently tracing the curve of her jaw, the warmth of his skin sparking against the cool, vibrant crimson of hers. Viola shivered, involuntarily closing her eyes at the unexpected softness of the contact. Nielsen leaned in, his mouth finding the sharp point of her ear. "You wanted pain and endurance," he murmured, his voice husky. "I will give you pleasure and persistence. I will push you past your measured limits, not by force but by the sheer, overwhelming detail of my dedication." He began to kiss her neck, his lips firm and demanding, but his hands remained gentle, running along the sharp line of her collarbone. He was utterly focused, dedicating his entire sensory apparatus to her. He was not just kissing her, he was consuming the moment, building an undeniable, all-encompassing connection. Viola gasped, the sound ragged. This was not the measured, calculated encounter she was expecting. This was an experience generated by the profound, singular attention of a human being. The krill relied on optimized physical sensation. Nielsen delivered integrated, emotional desire. Her hands shot out, gripping the sheet beneath her, her body arching involuntarily as the intensity mounted. Stop talking," she managed, her voice thick with sudden, unmanageable desire. "Just act." Nielsen shifted, kneeling on the bed beside her. He used his weight and strength not to dominate but to envelop her, leaning into her space until she was completely shielded from the watching eyes of her sisters. He kissed her fiercely, answering her demand for raw action with the full, unbridled depth of human desire. He moved with a rhythm that was both protective and demanding, a strategic storm of passion that focused entirely on her needs. Viola ceased to be the calculating strategist. She was reduced to pure response, her crimson skin flushing deeper, her breath coming in short, shocked gasps. The efficiency she prized was momentarily shattered by the exquisite inefficiency of genuine, overwhelming human dedication. She wrapped her arms around Nielsen's neck, pulling him down, demanding more, demanding the sensation that went far beyond her species' capacity for mere physical optimization. After what felt like an eternity of blistering intensity, Nielsen pulled back, his own chest heaving. Viola's sapphire eyes were dark, dilated, and utterly stunned. She was physically exhausted, her body trembling slightly with the aftershocks of the passion Nielsen had unleashed. He gently brushed the sapphire hair from her flushed crimson cheek. Was that sufficient, ere Viola? Viola couldn't speak. She simply stared, her expression a mix of awe and possessive hunger. She had calculated for a confrontation, but Nielsen had overwhelmed her with the raw, potent, unfiltered human desire. Orlith let out a breath from the edge of the room, a sound of political gratification mixed with deep, grudging fascination. "The strategist is satisfied," Orlith declared, her voice unnaturally steady. "The parameters of intensity have been catalogued. We proceed with the final sister." Viola clung to Nielsen's arm, not letting go, her grip tight and proprietary. She had accepted the human's challenge and been utterly, passionately defeated by its sincerity. Nielsen had validated her need for intensity, but he had done it on his terms. He looked up at the third sister, Elsith the historian. She was still standing, observing. Her blue eyes were no longer detached. They were glittering with urgent, profound curiosity. The shift from Viola's raw, kinetic energy to Elsith's serene, intellectual intensity was immediate and jarring. Viola still clung possessively to Nielsen's arm, her crimson skin still heated from the encounter, but Elsith's presence commanded a different kind of attention. Orlith gently pried Viola's fingers off Nielsen, asserting her practical control. Viola's needs are met. Elsith's research must be concluded before we can officially present the unified front. Nielsen detached himself, adjusting his uniform, which felt rumpled and impossibly confining after the two intense encounters. He approached Elsith, meeting her calm, cerulean gaze. Her fiery orange hair seemed to absorb the room's light, giving her a quiet, profound intensity. "Herr Elsith," Nielsen said, his voice lowering with genuine respect. "You are the historian, you observe the past to predict the future. What do you require from this protocol that your sisters did not?" Elsith walked slowly toward him, her movements graceful and measured. Her demeanor was one of an academic faced with a potentially species-defining artifact. "My sisters require political stability and primal satisfaction," Elsith replied, her voice soft, imbued with the ancient wisdom of her role. "I require understanding. Human emotion is categorized as a high-complexity variable in Krill behavioral science. Your species possesses the unique capability to layer physical pleasure with profound, self-aware emotional context. I must catalog the mechanisms of this process." She stopped inches from him. Unlike her sisters, she did not seize him. Instead, she lifted her hands, hovering them carefully just above his chest. "When Orlith kissed you, you returned not passion but focused sincerity. When Viola demanded intensity, you returned overwhelming dedication," Elsith continued, her blue eyes piercing. "Show me the why, Nielsen. Why does the complexity of emotion enhance physical sensation for your species? Why is profound vulnerability the key to your greatest strength?" Nielsen felt a profound sense of connection with Elsith that was different from the political sparring with Orlith or the passionate trial with Viola. Elsith was asking for his truth, not his performance. This was the core of the trait they needed, the human mind's capacity for layered connection. "We feel the experience, Elsith, not just the physical stimulus," Nielsen explained softly. "The physical act is the language, but the emotion, the respect, the desire to please, the vulnerability, that is the meaning. That meaning makes the experience infinitely deeper." Elsith's eyes closed briefly as she absorbed the explanation, cataloging the data. Then her eyes snapped open. "I must experience this meaning, Nielsen," she declared, her tone entirely serious. "I cannot catalog it from observation. If I am to sign the treaty, I must understand the mechanism of your species' profound sensory integration." She reached up, her blue fingers gently tracing the sharp curve of his jaw and his cheekbone. Her touch was incredibly light, almost clinical, yet possessive. Nielsen felt a shiver run down his spine, a response to the intense, analytical focus of her attention. "I require quiet, I require detail," Elsith whispered. "I need to feel the context, Nielsen. Show me your vulnerability. Show me the connection that is purely for understanding." Nielsen accepted the challenge. He knew if he could show Elsith the profound internal landscape that drove human intimacy, he would secure her commitment and thus the treaty. He placed his hands gently on her waist, drawing her slightly closer. He didn't rush. He slowed his breathing, allowing the rich, deep sincerity that was his greatest weapon to flood the space between them. "Vulnerability is trust, Elsith," Nielsen murmured, his gaze holding hers. "Trust that the person you are sharing with will cherish the core of you. You are the historian. Let me read you like the most valuable, sensitive text." He lowered his head not for a demanding kiss but for a lingering, profound exchange. His lips touched hers with a softness that was almost agonizingly slow. It was a kiss of pure, focused sensory integration. He paid attention to the minute textures, the precise warmth, the infinitesimal pressure. Elsith gasped into the kiss, not from passion but from the shock of the overwhelming detail. She had prepared for a physical act. Nielsen gave her a neurological explosion. He was demanding her mind as much as her body. He used his fingers to gently smooth the skin of her cerulean arm, the simple action transmitting a wealth of non-verbal information, respect, profound focus, and delicate desire. He showed her that every single nerve ending, every thought was dedicated to understanding her individual experience. Elsith began to tremble, her composure finally cracking under the intense, integrated focus. Her hands, which had been so careful to hover, suddenly tightened around Nielsen's neck, pulling him closer, demanding the continuity of the sensation. Her quiet murmur of pleasure was not a gasp of satisfaction like Viola's, but a sound of sudden, profound intellectual revelation. She had found the answer to her research question. The human capacity for pleasure was magnified exponentially by the inclusion of genuine emotional context. The feeling was completely, beautifully overwhelming. Nielsen broke the kiss, leaving her suspended in a state of sensory shock. Elsith's blue eyes were shining, wide with a mixture of awe and satisfied revelation. Her breathing was fast and shallow. "The data is conclusive," Elsith whispered, her voice husky. "The layered context is undeniable. It is profound, Nielsen. The emotional component is the primary catalyst for the physical response." She looked at Orlith and Viola, her expression transformed. The scholar's detachment was gone, replaced by the fervor of a believer. "I find the human male Nielsen suitable," Elsith confirmed, her voice ringing with finality. "He possesses the unique ability to honor the individual complexity of all three matrices. The condition is met." Nielsen felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had navigated the three individual tests, asserted his humanity, and earned the genuine, individual commitment of each sister. He was about to speak, to formally accept the terms of the unified protocol when Orlith spoke, her voice laced with sudden, sharp urgency. "The individual assessments are complete, but the time we spent has cost us, Nielsen," Orlith hissed, crossing the room quickly. "The treaty negotiation is set for dawn. Councillor Treval has been watching our quarantine. He is demanding an audience with the full Hegemony Council to challenge the validity of our choice." Viola rose from the bed, her military instinct instantly kicking in. "Treval will claim Nielsen is unfit. He will argue that the complexity of his primitive emotional nature makes him a risk to Krill's stability." Nielsen's blood ran cold. He had secured the sisters, but the political battlefield was far from secure. Elsith stepped close to him, her fingers lacing with his. "He cannot invalidate the protocol if the bond is proven to be absolute and unified, Nielsen. We must finalize the unification now, before Treval can mobilize." Orlith took his other hand, her grip firm and demanding. "The protocol requires that the partner be capable of integrating all three needs simultaneously. The political statement must be overwhelming. We need a public unified front within the hour." The three sisters, Orlith pragmatism, Viola passion, and Elsith context, stood surrounding Nielsen, their vibrant skin tones creating a fierce contrast to his human paleness. The hook was set, they had chosen him individually, now they needed him to choose them, all of them, for the final, political and sensual act of unification. The temperature in the royal suite seemed to spike as the three sisters closed around Nielsen, their unified focus an almost unbearable weight of expectation. The revelation of Councillor Treval's imminent political challenge crystallized the stakes. The unification could not just be sincere, it had to be a statement of total, irrevocable solidarity. "Treval will attempt to leverage my human complexity against you," Nielsen acknowledged, his mind racing. "He'll argue that I can't maintain three distinct, individual bonds without compromising the political whole. He wants to prove I'll introduce chaotic emotional variables into Krill governance. He is counting on your culture's focus on serial monogamy to fracture your dedication," Orlith confirmed, her jade eyes sharp with calculation. "The Krill view the shared consort as a single, unified position, a vessel of consensus. If you show preference, or if your dedication is not equally distributed, the claim is nullified." Viola tightened her grip on his arm, her crimson skin radiating heat. "We proved your individual commitment, Nielsen. Now we must prove the integration. The protocol requires a total, unified sensual exchange to seal the contract, human. It is the only way to publicly refute Treval." Elsith, the historian, looked beyond the immediate politics to the profound, cultural implication. "This unified bond is not just about the treaty, Nielsen. It is about redefining Krill law. If we succeed, we prove that Krill authority can evolve through genuine, sincere connection, rather than purely pragmatic rule." Nielsen looked at the three faces, the rigid control of Orlith, the simmering fire of Viola, and the profound depth of Elsith. He saw not 3 rulers demanding a service, but 3 intelligent, powerful beings demanding his complete, authentic self. This was the ultimate test. Could a human's capacity for love be the force that elevates an entire civilization? "I understand the parameters, heirs," Mielsen stated, his voice firm with absolute conviction. "I will not be a vessel of consensus, I will be an equal partner. And I will make the contract irrevocable by ensuring that the unified bond is not a subtraction of my individual commitment, but a multiplication of it. I will commit to the woman you are, not the role you play." He stepped back slightly, pulling the 3 sisters with him. The air crackled with anticipation. "Orlith," Mielsen began, his gaze focused on the pragmatist, "you demand control. You will guide this process, asserting your need for structure, ensuring all of us move forward with intention." Orlith nodded, her expression hardening with the satisfaction of having her leadership acknowledged and integrated into the most intimate of spaces. Mielsen shifted his focus to Viola. "Viola, you demand intensity and action. You will be the fire, ensuring this bond is not cold calculation but searing, undeniable passion." Viola's lips curved into a wicked, satisfied smile, her sapphire eyes blazing. She needed to know her passion was essential to the whole. Finally, Mielsen looked at Elsith, his expression softening slightly. "And Elsith, you demand context. You will be the heart, ensuring that every touch, every action, every shared breath carries the weight of genuine emotional meaning, binding the others to the sincerity of the moment." Elsith's serene expression broke into a look of profound acceptance. She was the one who most understood the power Mielsen was wielding, the ability to integrate separate needs into a cohesive, powerful experience. "Then proceed, Mielsen," Orlith commanded, her voice dropping to a low, sensual demand. "Show us the integrated human dedication that the krill species has never known." The sisters moved in on him, this time not with the detached formality of a political claim, but with the demanding unity of 3 women who had individually chosen a man and now needed to claim him as a whole. Orlith initiated the first movement. She released his arm and used her hands to gently but firmly take hold of the hem of his pristine white uniform shirt. She looked Mielsen in the eye, her jaw set, and with one sharp, commanding motion, she tore the fabric down the center. The sound was shockingly loud in the quiet, opulent room. The action was purely Orlith, decisive, pragmatic, removing the impediment to the necessary objective. Mielsen stood still, the political symbol of his diplomatic mission lying in shreds at his feet. The exposure of his torso, broad, muscular, and very human, was both an act of surrender and an assertion of his powerful physical presence. Viola immediately moved to capitalize on the moment. Her crimson hands, hot and quick, moved over his chest, her touch instantly shifting from a demanding acquisition to a passionate exploration. She didn't seek his compliance, she sought his immediate, primal response. She pressed her cheek against his skin, inhaling the unique, potent scent of his human pheromones, her body vibrating with unchecked primal desire. Elsith was the last to move, and her action was the most profound. She reached out and placed one cerulean hand flat against the center of his chest, directly over his sternum. Her touch was gentle, but her intent was deep. She was seeking the emotional rhythm of his heart, the context of the act. She didn't look at his body, she looked into his eyes, demanding sincerity. Mielsen felt himself utterly enveloped. Orlith's control was present in the structure of the encounter, Viola's fire was present in the heat and urgency of the touch, and Elsith's context was present in the profound, unwavering demand for emotional honesty in his eyes. He was being claimed not by 3 separate desires but by one magnificent, integrated need. He leaned his head back, allowing the sensation to wash over him. His hands went to Orlith's waist, gripping her firmly, acknowledging her control. His voice was a low growl of pure, overwhelming feeling. "I am yours," Mielsen stated, the phrase not a surrender but a declaration of dedication. "All of me, all of you, now let us finalize this contract." The unified focus of the Krill sisters was breathtaking. Orlith, asserting her control, guided his hands to the intricate clasps of their black bandeau tops, signaling the next necessary step. Viola, the strategist of passion, began kissing Mielsen's neck with urgent, consuming ferocity. And Elsith, the historian of connection, kept her hand pressed over his heart, ensuring that the physical act was constantly imbued with the weight of sincerity and profound emotional depth. The act of unification became an integrated symphony of control, passion, and meaning. Mielsen demonstrated the trait of total commitment, maintaining a distinct, intense connection with each sister simultaneously, proving that his emotional capacity was not a weakness, but a staggering, complex strength. He matched Orlith's disciplined focus with his own unyielding stamina. He met Viola's overwhelming passion with an equally intense but grounded response, and he provided Elsith with the deep, profound emotional context she needed to validate the entire experience. The unified, powerful sensual exchange solidified the bond, forging a four-way connection that transcended Krill tradition. This was not a political arrangement, it was the birth of a profound, new kind of partnership, catalyzed by the depth of human sincerity. As the physical requirements of the protocol reached their zenith, a proximity alarm sounded sharply in the suite, shattering the intimate moment. Orlith pulled back instantly, her rose-pink skin flushed with exertion and adrenaline, but her politician's mind instantly reasserted control. "Treval is mobilizing the council early," Orlith hissed, snatching a tactical screen from the wall. "He is claiming the consort is invalid due to undue coercion and emotional instability. We must appear before the hegemony immediately." Viola sprang off the bed, her breath coming in fast, sharp gasps, her crimson skin shining. "The contract is sealed, Orlith. The protocol is complete. We must present the proof of our unified claim now." Elsith stood beside Mielson, her cerulean hand still pressed against his chest, her eyes blazing with fierce, protective devotion. "Our connection must be public, Mielson. It must be undeniable. Our combined display of affection must be so overwhelming that the concept of a chaotic variable becomes proof of our strength." Mielson, his breath heavy, looked at the three of them. He had earned their individual commitment, and now he had secured their unified passion. The final fight was not physical but political, and he would use his human authenticity as the most lethal weapon. "Then let's show Councillor Treval what genuine, human-catalyzed unification looks like," Mielson declared, his voice ringing with conviction. "We will walk into that chamber, and I will show them what it means to claim a man who accepts all of you entirely." The transition from the intimate sanctity of the royal suite to the blinding, formal scrutiny of the Hegemony Council chamber was brutal. Mielson and the three sisters dressed in haste, the black and white of their attire a symbolic counterpoint to the vibrant colors of the Krill elite. Mielson was acutely aware of his appearance, his hair slightly mussed, his eyes blazing with the lingering intensity of the completed protocol. He wore a fresh uniform, but the tension radiating off his human body was undeniable. As they moved through the silent, gilded corridors, the sisters arranged themselves around him, their unified presence serving as his primary defense. This was where the human social dexterity became the critical element. Mielson didn't try to hide the intimate bond, he amplified it, turning their relationship into an overwhelming social weapon. Orlith walked slightly ahead, a position of protective authority, her rose-pink hand resting lightly on the small of Mielson's back, a gesture that, in Krill political language, denoted absolute, pragmatic ownership. Viola was glued to his right side, her crimson fingers laced tightly with his, a physical expression of fierce, proprietary passion. Her sapphire eyes constantly scanned the passing guards and officials, daring them to question the validity of the bond. Elsith walked on his left, her cerulean skin a serene contrast to the tension. Her touch was the most profound, her left hand resting on the pulse point of his wrist, constantly communicating connection and emotional context. They entered the vast, circular council chamber. Dozens of Krill officials, mostly severe, older males and politically established females, were seated in high tiers. At the center podium stood Councillor Treval, a stern-faced, powerfully built male Krill whose green-gray skin marked him as a member of the established, traditional hierarchy. Treval's face was a mask of cold satisfaction. "Heirs Orlith, Viola, and Elsith," Treval began, his voice booming with legalistic authority. "Your premature invocation of the consort protocol is noted. However, the selected partner, human Mielson, represents a species deemed too emotionally volatile for the stabilization required by Krill law. I submit that the bond is invalid due to undue coercion and the emotional instability inherent in the human matrix." Treval paused, gesturing toward Mielson with a dramatic sweep of his hand, inviting public scrutiny. Mielson didn't flinch, he didn't try to defend himself with words, he used action, amplified by his absolute comfort in the unified connection. As Treval spoke of emotional volatility, Mielson slowly turned his head toward Orlith. He gave her a look that was deeply private, intense, and utterly sincere, a silent acknowledgement of her control and her sacrifice. Orlith's jaw, which had been set in granite, softened imperceptibly. Her jade eyes briefly flashed with a warmth that the entire Krill hegemony would consider a fatal flaw in a ruler. The gesture was fleeting, but it was there. The powerful, pragmatic leader was allowing herself to be cherished. Then Nielsen focused on Viola. He squeezed her hand, a firm, possessive, challenging grip. He met her sapphire eyes and gave her a smile that was dangerously close to a shared, carnal secret, a private acknowledgement of the passionate storm they had just weathered. Viola's lips curved into a slow, satisfied smirk, a silent confirmation that the human's passion was hers and hers alone. Finally, Nielsen met Elsith's gaze. He released her wrist only to gently place his fingers against her cheek, the cerulean skin cool beneath his touch. It was a gesture of profound tenderness and respect, a declaration that he saw her, the historian, the emotional heart. Elsith leaned into the touch, closing her eyes for a brief, blissful moment, accepting the sincerity of the context. The entire sequence lasted maybe 5 seconds, but the impact on the council was instantaneous. The Krill elite operated on cold, non-verbal signals. What they witnessed was not a coerced partnership, but a devastatingly coordinated, emotionally rich display of unified affection. Treval sputtered, momentarily losing his composure. "Heirs, you display a reckless, a profound lack of decorum. These primitive displays are precisely the chaos I speak of." Orlith stepped forward, using Nielsen's arm as a lever, pulling him slightly ahead of her, presenting him as the physical embodiment of their consensus. "On the contrary, Councillor Treval," Orlith stated, her voice icy but her rose-pink skin glowing with suppressed emotion, "we display the proof of the consort protocol's success. The human Nielsen, with his unique capacity for individual sincerity, has allowed us to achieve the deepest unification in Krill history." Viola stepped in, her passionate fury adding fuel to the political fire. "We are not fractured, Treval, we are augmented. His passion is ours, his strength is our consensus, and his devotion is total. You mistake depth of feeling for chaos." Elsith concluded the defense, her voice ringing with the quiet conviction of an undeniable truth. "The treaty requires a unified front. We present the first Krill authority unified not just by political necessity, but by a genuine, integrated emotional bond. The human is not a risk, Counselor. He is the catalyst for our evolution." Nielsen felt a surge of pride. He hadn't spoken a word, but his actions, backed by the integrated emotional response of the three sisters, had turned Treval's attack on its head. The sisters were now wielding the emotional complexity of humanity as a political weapon. Treval, desperate, turned on Nielsen directly. "Human, you are silent because you are a mere symbol. Confirm your subservience to the hegemony, or this claim is void." Nielsen finally spoke, his voice carrying the calm, grounded weight of his conviction. "My name is Nielsen," he stated, meeting Treval's hostile glare with unshakable sincerity. "I am a partner to heirs Orlith, Viola, and Elsith. I am not subservient to the hegemony. I am entirely dedicated to the needs and safety of the three women who stand beside me." He tightened his grip on Viola's and Orlith's hands simultaneously, leaning into Elsith's supportive touch. His protective drive, the profound, unwavering loyalty of a human who has bonded, was on full display. The Krill Council members began to murmur, the sound rising from confusion to grudging respect. They understood the power of dedication, even if they had never experienced it. The intensity of Nielsen's sincerity, backed by the sisters' visible, genuine emotional response, was a defense Treval had not accounted for. "The consensus is clear, Councillor Treval," Orlith stated, delivering the final blow. "The protocol is satisfied, the human is claimed, and the heirs are unified. The Unity Treaty negotiations will proceed at dawn." Treval looked defeated, his face twitching with barely controlled fury. He knew he had been outmaneuvered not by politics, but by the overwhelming, genuine power of human love. Councillor Treval's defeat in the chamber did not signal the end of the threat. It only confirmed that the threat had shifted from political maneuvering to active, desperate sabotage. Nielsen and the sisters retreated from the council, the victory feeling fragile. The Unity Treaty signing was still scheduled for dawn, held at the highly secure, remote Galactic Archive Spire, a massive, ancient structure built into a high plateau several hundred kilometers from the capital city. As they returned to the royal suite to prepare, the strategic urgency began to pull the sisters apart. "The council accepted the bond," Orlith stated, her pragmatic mind already moving past the victory. but Treval's influence is still considerable. He will attack the security of the signing location. Viola was already at the tactical screen, calling up schematics of the archive spire. The spire's security protocols are ancient. They rely on cold calculation and predictive programming. Treval knows exactly where the weak points are. A sudden priority notification flashed on the screen, drawing Orlith's attention. A significant energy drain has just been detected in the spire's primary environmental controls. This is intentional. Treval is creating a destabilizing element to force a security shutdown and delay the signing. If the treaty is delayed, the other factions will withdraw their support, Elsith confirmed, her voice filled with quiet alarm. Treval achieves his goal without open conflict. The crisis demanded immediate, individual action. Viola, you must secure the political support. Use the urgency to force the remaining wavering council members to declare their loyalty before Treval can bribe them, Orlith ordered. Orlith, you must manage the crisis response in the capital. The environmental controls are central to the whole city's function, Viola countered. Elsith, you stay with Mielson. You know the archaic architecture of the spire's protocols. Your historical knowledge is key to understanding Treval's attack, Orlith commanded. Mielson watched the controlled frenzy. The sisters were brilliant, executing their duties with machine-like efficiency, but the stress was palpable. Their species valued detachment, yet Mielson could see the tight line of worry around Orlith's mouth and the quick, shallow breaths Viola took. Wait, Mielson interjected, cutting through the strategic planning with the grounded weight of his human intuition. Treval's attack on the environmental controls is a diversion. If he can create enough chaos, the Krill security will focus on fixing the known problem. He is going after the treaty physically. Orlith paused, looking at him skeptically. Why would you assume that, Mielson? It is inefficient. Because I know humans, and Treval is now desperate, using highly emotional tactics disguised as political ones, Mielson insisted, stepping closer to Orlith. Emotional decision-making is often based on the most satisfying final action. He wants to destroy the symbol of your unification, the treaty itself. The control failure is just noise. Viola considered this, her sapphire eyes narrowed. The spire's sub-basement houses the treaty vaults. It is the least secured area, as no one expects a direct attack. Mielson turned to Elsith, his protective drive instantly kicking in. Elsith and I need to get to the spire immediately. We need to assess the physical threat. You two cannot leave the capital right now. The sisters hesitated, their political duty warring with the protective instinct Mielson had awakened in them. Orlith stepped forward, her hand reaching out to touch his cheek, a rare, public display of affection. Go, Mielson, use your human intuition. If you are wrong, you will repair the controls. If you are right, you will protect the treaty. Viola pulled him into a quick, fierce embrace, her crimson skin pressed against his. Be safe, human, we rely on your judgment. Mielson felt the surge of adrenaline mixed with profound emotional satisfaction. They were relying entirely on his human gut feeling. Mielson and Elsith left immediately, boarding a high-speed personal shuttle for the spire. The journey was silent and tense, Elsith meticulously reviewing the spire's ancient blueprints on a datapad. As the shuttle sped over the vast, desolate Krill plains toward the towering structure, Elsith finally looked up, her cerulean face etched with worry. Mielson, your conviction, it is so absolute, Elsith whispered, reaching out to lace her fingers with his. You base a life-or-death political decision on a hunch. This is the vulnerability I studied. Do you not fear the risk? Mielson squeezed her hand firmly, offering a flash of his intense, grounded sincerity. I don't fear the risk, Elsith. I fear the failure to protect what matters. You and your sisters matter. The treaty matters. My intuition is driven by my loyalty to you. That loyalty is the strongest weapon I possess. He pulled her across the small space and into his lap, holding her tightly. This was their moment of clandestine connection, a necessary reaffirmation of their bond under extreme stress. He kissed her with an urgency that was both passion and protection. The shuttle landed with a rough bump at the base of the galactic archive spire. The vast, silent structure was built of cold, smooth metal, entirely devoid of life. A single, small entry hatch led into the understructure. The treaty vault is 2 sublevels down, Elsith stated, her voice tight with adrenaline pointing toward the hatch. We need to get there, now. Mielson gently set her down. Treval is already here. He wouldn't risk this operation without being present. We need to move fast, Elsith, and we need to be silent. He took the lead, pushing the hatch open and dropping into the cold, silent depths of the ancient spire. The sublevels of the Galactic Archive spire were vast, silent caverns of cold concrete and ancient, dusty equipment. The air was thick and metallic, smelling of disused machinery. Nielsen moved with a focused intensity that startled Elsith, his diplomatic composure utterly replaced by a primal, protective competence. "Your gait is different," Elsith whispered, her voice barely audible as she followed Nielsen, relying completely on his superior human night vision in the dim light. "Your movements are less considered, more decisive." "Diplomacy is about consideration. Protection is about action," Nielsen replied, his voice a low growl. He paused at a junction of two service tunnels, his ear pressed against the cold metal wall, listening for any telltale sounds. He heard it, a faint, rhythmic clicking sound, emanating from the left tunnel. "That's not the sound of environmental controls failing," Nielsen murmured, pulling Elsith back against the shadows. "That is the sound of Krill precision engineering. Treval is installing a device near the vault." Elsith's cerulean skin paled in the gloom. "If it's a seismic charge, it will destroy the entire level. We must alert Orlith and Vierla." "No time," Nielsen hissed, already moving toward the sound, pulling Elsith along. "Treval has isolated the transmission relays. We are on our own. I need you to lead me to the most dense nexus of wiring and power conduits near the treaty vault. I need to weaponize this place." This was Nielsen's moment, improvised human ingenuity. Stripped of his formal tools and forced to operate under immense duress, his mind shifted from emotional mediator to rapid, resourceful engineer. They moved quickly through the labyrinthine tunnels until Elsith pointed toward a large, humming service panel on the ceiling. "That is the secondary access to the vault's internal power grid. The primary is upstairs, now failing due to the diversion." Nielsen nodded, his mind already calculating. "I need a distraction, Elsith. A massive, non-lethal surge to buy me 30 seconds at that panel. Can you isolate the environmental control signals that Treval is currently using?" Elsith's fear was completely overshadowed by the intellectual challenge. "Yes, I can piggyback onto the failing system and force a temporary energy spike into the ventilation system. It will sound like a catastrophic failure." "Do it," Nielsen commanded, already pulling himself onto a nearby conduit, clambering toward the ceiling panel. Elsith, working with frantic, quiet precision, accessed a nearby terminal and began manipulating the dying system, her fiery hair illuminated by the screen. The rhythmic clicking from the tunnel grew louder. "Nielsen, he is directly beneath us," Elsith cried, her voice strained. Just as Nielsen reached the panel and ripped its heavy cover plate off, Elsith triggered the spike. A deafening, metallic shriek echoed through the tunnels as the ventilation system surged, coupled with a blinding flicker of the emergency lights. Nielsen heard a curse and the sound of someone scrambling beneath them. He immediately began ripping wire from the panel, his eyes seeking the heavy-gauge cables leading to the emergency plasma conduit, a high-amperage, dormant security feed. He was working entirely on instinct, using his knowledge of thermodynamics and raw electrical power transfer. He ignored the Krill labeling and focused on the gauge, insulation, and composition of the wiring. He needed a quick, high-voltage deterrent. He pulled several heavy-duty cables from the conduit and quickly stripped the insulation with a tool he'd managed to sneak from his diplomatic kit, a simple, steel-bladed utility knife. He rapidly twisted the wires into a makeshift, non-lethal electroshock weapon designed to transfer the massive voltage of the spire's emergency system upon contact. "Elsith now," Nielsen yelled. He looked down just as Counselor Treval and two Krill guards emerged from the tunnel, their traditional laser rifles raised. Treval's eyes were narrowed with murderous intent. He saw Nielsen, his human body silhouetted against the broken service panel. "The human diplomat," Treval roared. "Seize him, the protocol is void." As the guards raised their weapons, Nielsen dropped from the ceiling, his body landing hard and low. He didn't run. He lunged directly toward Treval, holding the rapidly cobbled-together tangle of wire like a bizarre, primitive weapon. Treval raised his rifle, but Nielsen was too fast. He sidestepped the shot, his human agility surprising the bulky Krill. He slammed the electrified wire directly against the metal armor plating of the lead Krill guard. A blinding blue spark erupted, followed by a sharp crack. The guard immediately seized up, the current overloading his suit's internal regulators, and he collapsed, twitching, the laser rifle clattering harmlessly away. Treval gasped, his cold composure finally cracking. He had expected a diplomat, a politician, not a resourceful primal warrior. Mielson immediately turned to the second guard, but Treval stepped in front, pulling a sidearm and firing. The blast of energy grazed Mielson's side. He felt a searing, agonizing pain, forcing a deep, pained human shout from his lungs. The trait of sheer human pain tolerance kicked in. He didn't stop. He pushed through the pain, lunging past Treval and slamming the weaponized wire into the final guard, dropping him instantly. Now it was just Mielson, wounded and breathing hard, facing Treval. Treval looked at Mielson's raw, wounded intensity and saw not a diplomat, but the terrifying efficiency of a human driven by loyalty. "You're a savage human," Treval spat, raising his rifle. "I'm a partner," Mielson corrected, his voice tight with pain and adrenaline. He threw the useless, spent wire away. He was relying purely on his human body now, his size, his strength, and his protective fury. Elsith, watching the raw, terrifying display of a human protecting his beloved, gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The sensuality of the moment was intertwined with the adrenaline, the intense draw of his decisive, protective action. Mielson moved on pure instinct, ignoring the searing burn of the grazed wound on his side. Treval, operating under the assumption that Mielson was still a rational diplomat, hesitated for a split second, allowing Mielson the tactical advantage. Mielson lunged low, tackling Treval. The impact was massive, throwing the counselor against a concrete pillar with a sickening crunch. Mielson used the full weight of his human body, broader and more densely muscled than the krill had predicted, to pin Treval to the ground. Treval struggled, his face contorted in a mask of panic and fury. "You cannot do this, human. This is an act of war." Mielson pressed his forearm against Treval's throat, his blue-gray eyes blazing with a focus that was terrifyingly primal. "I told you, Treval, I am dedicated to the safety of the 3 women who stand beside me. You threaten them, you face me." He delivered a single, sharp blow to Treval's jaw, knocking the counselor unconscious. The primal, protective drive of the human male had won the fight. Mielson immediately rolled off Treval, staggering slightly to his feet, breathing heavily, the pain in his side a constant, throbbing distraction. Elsith ran to him, her face streaming with tears, the sight of his wound overriding her historian's detachment. She was clutching the laser rifle of the downed guard, her stance surprisingly protective. "Mielson, your side," Elsith cried, her cerulean hand trembling as she touched the wound. "It's a graze, non-critical," Mielson ground out, looking past her, his gaze scanning the tunnel. "The charges, where are they?" Elsith pointed to a heavily shielded panel embedded in the wall behind Treval. "He sealed them in that conduit. It will take a sonic charge to open the casing. The countdown is already initiated." Mielson stumbled toward the panel, inspecting the casing. "I can't open that without the right tools. We need the spire's internal comms." Suddenly, the floor beneath them began to vibrate. Loud, rhythmic pounding approached from the tunnel Mielson and Elsith had used. "More guards, Treval must have had a secondary team," Elsith cried. Mielson didn't panic. He looked at Elsith, his focus returning to the strategic. "Elsith, you are the historian, you know the spire's architecture. Is there an environmental fail-safe, a way to divert the seismic energy?" Elsith's brilliant mind, catalyzed by the adrenaline and the fierce desire to protect the man she now loved, went to work. "Yes, the spire has an emergency harmonic vent. It uses the structure's ancient resonant frequencies to stabilize seismic shockwaves. It is above us. I can activate it, but it requires a physical trigger and a vocalized access code." "Go," Mielson ordered, pushing her toward a nearby service ladder. "I'll hold them off." As Elsith scrambled up the ladder, Mielson retrieved one of the fallen krill laser rifles. He hadn't been trained for combat, but he was highly intelligent and driven by a need to survive for his partners. He took cover behind the concrete pillar. 3 more heavily armored krill guards rounded the corner. They opened fire instantly. Mielson returned fire, his human accuracy surprising even himself. He aimed not for the guards, but for the steam pipes and electrical conduits near the tunnel entrance, attempting to create more chaos and block their advance. The small space became a diplomatic firefight, Mielson's human resilience and improvisation keeping 3 trained soldiers pinned down. The heat from the laser fire mixed with the metallic smell of the tunnels. Up above, Elsith reached the top of the tunnel, finding a large, ancient metal grill, the harmonic vent. She fumbled with the locking mechanism, her fingers numb with cold and fear. "Nielsen, the code," Elsith screamed down, ducking as a laser blast singed the air near her head. Nielsen, his shoulder slammed against the pillar, his breath tearing in his lungs, shouted the code, his voice raw with effort. Unity Matrix 98. Elsith, using the strength she didn't know she possessed, finally wrenched the grill open. She shouted the code into the vent, triggering the ancient stabilization system. A deep, resonating hum filled the spire, a sound that vibrated through Nielsen's bones. The rhythmic clicking of the explosive charges stopped. The Krill guards, disoriented by the sound and the sudden lack of target, ceased firing. A secondary effect of the harmonic vent, which Nielsen hadn't predicted, was the massive surge of energy it demanded. The entire level plunged into complete, absolute darkness. Nielsen dropped the now useless rifle, the sound swallowed by the silence. He was injured, alone, and trapped in the darkness. Then he heard it not from the tunnels but from his comm link. "Nielsen, report, we are approaching the spire." It was Orlith's voice, sharp with command, laced with unmistakable panic. "Nielsen, are you safe? Where is the danger?" Viola's voice followed, demanding. Nielsen slumped against the pillar, exhausted. "Treval is secured, charges neutralized, Elsith is safe, but I'm down in the sublevel, need extraction and a medic." Minutes later, the emergency lights of a high-speed transport cut through the darkness. Orlith and Viola burst into the sublevel, followed by a team of Krill's security and medics. They ran immediately to Nielsen and Elsith, ignoring Treval and the downed guards. Orlith reached Nielsen first, her cool, pragmatic facade shattered by the sight of his bloodied side. She immediately took command of the scene, directing the medics with fierce, clipped orders, but her rose-pink fingers clutched Nielsen's wrist with a proprietary desperation that was utterly non-political. Viola was a whirlwind of protective fury. She ran to Treval's unconscious form, kicking the rifle away, her crimson skin blazing. Then she turned to Nielsen, her eyes shining with unshed tears and intense admiration. She embraced him fiercely, burying her face in his neck, the raw, unfiltered passion overwhelming her commander's reserve. Elsith stood beside Nielsen, holding the Krill laser rifle like a trophy, her cerulean eyes glowing with fierce devotion. She looked at her sisters, then at the defeated Counselor Treval. The moment was one of staggering impact. Nielsen, the wounded human diplomat, had just protected the Krill hegemony not with politics, but with primal, resourceful loyalty and sheer physical resilience. Nielsen's wound was superficial but painful, quickly tended to by the Krill medics. The discovery of Counselor Treval's attempted sabotage, coupled with the overwhelming evidence of Nielsen's bravery, instantly solidified the sisters' political position. The treaty was secure, the opposition neutralized, and the human union's commitment was proven beyond question. The treaty was signed hours later, not in the ruined spire, but in a hastily reconvened, heavily guarded council chamber, with Nielsen seated between the three sisters, his hand visible and firmly held by Orlith and Viola. The sisters' unified front, now visibly fueled by genuine affection and Nielsen's recent, painful sacrifice, was an insurmountable political force. Later that evening, back in the silent, opulent royal suite, the three sisters held a private, deeply personal ritual. They did not speak of politics or treaties. Nielsen sat on the edge of the massive, circular bed, his side bandaged, the lingering ache serving as a reminder of the day's brutal, necessary actions. Orlith approached him first, her posture still rigid, but her jade eyes softened by a wealth of emotion she could no longer deny. She carried a heavy, ornate Krill artifact, a solid, silver circlet of unification. "Nielsen," Orlith began, her voice low and resonant, heavy with the weight of history. "Krill law states that the consort is a tool of state, but your sincerity, your ingenuity, and your immense capacity for protective loyalty has redefined that law. You did not submit to the protocol, you elevated it." She didn't place the circlet on his head. Instead, she gently took his hand, the hand that had wielded the improvised weapon, and placed the silver band in his palm. "We accept you not as a consort, but as an equal, Nielsen," Orlith decreed, her voice thick with unprecedented emotion. "Our authority is unified through you. Your emotional depth is our strength. You have forced the Krill hegemony to evolve." Viola followed, her crimson skin glowing. She knelt before him, a gesture of profound respect that shocked Nielsen. She reached up and placed her hot, passionate hands on his temples, locking her sapphire gaze with his. "You are not just a partner, Nielsen. You are the only one who met our fire with your own, yet contained it with fierce dedication," Viola whispered, her voice laced with raw devotion. You showed me that passion is not chaos but the most powerful form of commitment. You are mine, human. And I am yours. She kissed him then, a soft, profound kiss of pure devotion, acknowledging his sacrifice and his strength. Finally, Elsith came to him. She did not kneel but sat beside him, their bodies close, her cerulean skin pressed against his unbandaged side. She did not offer an artifact, she offered herself. I studied vulnerability, Mielson, and I observed the immense power it generates, Elsith murmured, her fiery hair cascading over his shoulder. You risked yourself completely for us based only on an emotional instinct, that loyalty that is the most valuable data point in Krill history. She lifted his chin, forcing him to meet her deep, discerning blue eyes. I was a historian, now I am an architect of the future. Our future, Mielson, you belong here with us, changing our world with your love. The three sisters then moved into a unified embrace, surrounding Mielson on the bed. Orlith's rose-pink skin pressed against his back, anchoring the structure of their control. Viola's crimson limbs wrapped around his front, providing the intensity of their shared passion, and Elsith's cerulean hands rested over their clasped hands, providing the context of profound, quiet sincerity. Mielson, the Human Union diplomat, had not just secured a galactic treaty, he had permanently altered the cultural landscape of a powerful civilization using the one thing they lacked, the power of sincere, deep, and integrated human affection. He felt the weight of the silver circlet in his hand, not a symbol of his subservience but a token of his sovereignty. He looked at the three extraordinary women who now shared his life, each of them unique, each of them demanding a distinct connection, and each of them united by their profound love for him. He had accepted the challenge, he had chosen them all. I am yours, Mielson repeated, the words no longer an assertion of compliance but a declaration